Hi, my name is Greg Traynor, and I'm with Wyndham-Lyons Realty Services. Welcome to another podcast episode of Keeping It Real. I have a special guest today, Richard Barbercheck, and it's part of our Community Business Partnership interview program that we have at Wyndham-Lyons Realty Services. I just want to give a quick introduction of Richard and his business and what we're going to be talking about today. As a trusted advisor, Richard works with community business owners and professionals to develop and implement effective strategies, make more money faster, build effective teams, and focus on regaining control of their business. He brings 40 years of experience in analyzing thousands of businesses in a variety of industries, identifying their strategies and working with them to achieve success by navigating through challenging times. Throughout his career, Richard developed expertise in financial analysis, business development, business administration, policy, operations, and risk management, as well as providing leadership to 3 organizations as president and assisting in numerous acquisitions leading to successful cultural and business integrations. Retiring in the fall of 2016, he culminated his career as the corporate chief credit officer for First Financial Bank in Cincinnati, Ohio. Richard brings proven expertise in performance improvement, strategic planning, and change management. As a dynamic executive, his leadership style incorporates integrity, mutual respect, professionalism, and collaboration in developing successful organizational strategies. He's an exciting and inspirational public speaker, and as a certified business coach, consultant, and trainer, Richard is committed to helping business owners and professionals achieve success. Richard is active in the community as a board member and council training chair for the Dan Beard Council Boy Scouts of America. He is an active member of the Association for Corporate Growth, Financial Executives International, Westchester Liberty Chamber of Commerce, Claremont and Northern Kentucky Chambers of Commerce, and the Covington Council. Welcome. That's an impressive resume, Richard.
There's a lot more in there that probably needs to be. And for clarification, the Dan Beard Council activity I've passed on and passed the torch to others, so that's not an active piece, but I've always enjoyed working with the Boy Scouts of America.
Wonderful. I guess the first question I have for you today is, can you tell us about your background and how you became a business coach?
Yeah, more than happy to. So it's interesting because I went to school in agricultural business and economics, and that was way back in the 70s, but agriculture was an interest of mine, and the business and economic side of it came into play just because it made sense as we were moving through that. And when I started my career, it was really in agricultural sales, and it was a tough time economically. And the businesses that we were working with and that we were selling equipment to were struggling to get financing, to be financially profitable, and that type of thing. So I found myself talking to a lot of bankers and trying to help them understand how they can help their customers and do that. Well, long story short, I ended up in the industry and ended up in the banking industry for 35, 40 years out of my career. And throughout that entire time, what I found was that everything I did was focused around helping businesses succeed. So in banking, when you have businesses borrowing money and such, you end up in a situation where some of them are successful, some of them struggle but get by, and some of them just fail. And over the course of time, I began to ask myself, okay, what's going on with that? So that's what led me to where I am today. But the banking career was critical because it allowed me to do it not just for the businesses, but for the institutions that I worked for. So having been a bank president 3 different times, I realized, gosh, banks had the same problem businesses did. They had to figure out how to operate in a manner to help them achieve the goals and the objectives that they wanted to do. So having progressed through that and coming up through smaller community banks and moving into a more regional bank and seeing kind of small business, medium-sized, big business type perspectives, it was common ground for everybody that certain things have to be done in a business for it to be successful. So by the time I decided the banking career had enough, 35, 40 years in an industry to wear anybody out, I finally reached the point I need a sabbatical. So I took it, and in 16 we exited that, spent some time thinking about what we wanted to do, and realized that's what I want to do. I wanted to work with businesses to help them be more successful. That's what brought me to where I am today.
Great. What are the most common challenges that entrepreneurs and business owners face, and how do you help them overcome those challenges?
As I mentioned earlier, that there is some common ground in those challenges as to what businesses run into. And it's interesting how it manifests itself, because it doesn't seem like it's common. So some businesses that I'll work with are saying that we need to grow. Well, growth comes in a lot of different ways. And growth can come through sales, growth can come through economic or environmental geographic expansion. Growth can come through mergers and acquisitions. Growth can come through a lot of different things. So that's one aspect. Somebody else says, we need to have more effectiveness out of our people and our teams and what's going on there, and so that the business can produce more and be better. And that's a challenge that they run into. And then you get companies that run into the situation of transition, where maybe it's a family legacy-owned business, maybe it's one somebody built from the ground up, and it's time for them to retire. But it's time to figure out, what do we do with this now that we've got it and built it? Well, while all three of those seem like very separate and distinct challenges for businesses, the common denominator amongst all of them is a function of change. And all of us change every day, no matter what. We come into work every day, something happens, we have to change what we thought we were going to do. And we do it in small increments every day in all kinds of situations. What throws a loop is when you have a big change, when you're trying to achieve something that's just not a small incremental adjustment. And then we become fearful. And we all do this, and not all of us want to admit that, but we all tend to step back from that. It's uncomfortable. And so, even though it might be growth, even though it might be operational performance, even though it might be transitional issues, it's all about business owners getting comfortable with, how do I enact and engage with this change? And that's the biggest challenge business owners face. If they don't address the issue of change and understand how they're going to address that, then they're not going to be effective as they try and implement. And so what we try and do is really help them with that. Help them see what are the steps necessary to take and go through that. Dan Bleacher had a formula out there, and it's not commonly known, but it's sometimes taught in business schools and such. But Bleacher's formula said it is not truly mathematical. It's written mathematically, but it's D times B times Fs has to be greater than R, and I'll explain this. So D is dissatisfaction, and V is vision. Fs is first steps. So the dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs has got to be there and well defined. A vision for what a business owner wants to be different has to be clear and well defined. And the first steps of what they need to do to get that change enacted has to be well defined. If those three components of the formula are well set out and clear, they can be delivered to staff, they can be delivered to the customer base, or whatever the impact is, and they will overcome the resistance to that change, and the change will be more effective. So what we help them do is figure those three components out well, and then execute on those three components.
Excellent. In your experience, and I know anybody can own a business, but when you're out and about in the community and you're coaching, what makes the difference between just a business owner, and what characteristics differentiates just a business owner between a successful business owner?
And it's a great distinction, because in any business owner's mind, every business owner feels like they're successful most of the time. But there are some interesting differences between those that are noticeably successful and those that are just running their business. And I'd probably sum it up in the context of focus. Those that are really successful, that exceed beyond others, is because they have a really strong focus. Well, you can focus on what? Well, it's a couple different things, but the first thing they have to be focused on is their vision. What do you want? What do you want your company to be in 3 to 5, 10 years? Whatever that horizon is, can you describe that? And it's interesting to me as I meet with different business owners, the variety of answers I get when I ask that question. Some of them are very clear and very articulate about exactly what they want their business to be in that horizon. Others are uncertain. They just know they want it to be what it is or more, and not clear about it. The ones that are wildly successful are the ones that are very clear about it. And the reason they are is because that clarity that they have on their vision drives their actions every day. It sets their objectives. It helps them define their goals. It helps them clarify their strategies because they know those are in alignment with that vision. So I think the one thing that drives their success is their ability to focus on that. What are they wanting to achieve? And when there's clarity and focus around that, I think a lot more happens.
Well, I guess that almost answers my next question of how important it is to have strategies and set goals in your organization.
It does. It leads right into that because everybody has, I will say everybody tends to have a vision and they tend to have goals. Whether they're written down, memorialized, or specific or not is another issue. But they have them. And usually you'll find them and you can talk to them, it's up in their head and they'll articulate what those are. But taking that and memorializing those in a way that becomes meaningful, that can be looked at and understood by you and others in a business is what helps drive the achievement of those. It's critical to the success of the business. And it's kind of a hierarchy. From the vision helps you define the broad, big objectives of the organization. And from the objectives, you can refine those down to what goals would we have to achieve to meet that objective. And once you have the goals, then it drives down into what strategies do we execute to make sure the goal gets achieved. And the team engages around that. So it's a critical piece to the long-term success of business. Absolutely.
What role does mindset play in achieving business goals, and how do you help your clients develop a success-oriented mindset?
So mindset's one of the most critical pieces to any kind of success, whether it's business or otherwise. Think about it in the context of even sports figures that play. It's almost more about mindset than it is about their physical capacities. In a business, it's a lot the same way. If a business owner's got a really good quality, positive mindset around what they're trying to achieve, they'll be more enthusiastic, they'll be more engaged, they'll take ownership and responsibility. They have nothing to prove to anybody else, they only need to prove things to themselves. And they always have a focus on excellence. And so it's always about, I don't just want to do it, I want to do it right, you'll hear them say. Mm-hmm. And that mindset drives activity, and it drives accomplishment, and it gets there. And so we try to keep people focused on that kind of a perspective. And if we've got somebody that's on the other side of the line, if you will, that has more of a negative mindset, they have a tendency to be the ones you'll hear it from them. They'll have a tendency to be they'll blame other people, other things, other situations, other people for the things that don't work out right. They'll make excuses for what's going on. They tend to be negative about circumstances that are around them. And in those type of scenarios are evidenced sometimes with a mindset of scarcity. There are people who feel that there's only so much in the world, I'm going to get my share before you get yours. Mm-hmm. And when you have that negative kind of mindset, it's much, much more difficult to get enthusiastic about accomplishing things. Right. So we try to get them to focus on that positive side of getting things done. And it's one of those critical components.
That's huge in real estate. I can tell you that's the mindset that we try to keep our agents focused on, is the abundance mindset instead of the scarcity, that somebody's not taking away something, that there's plenty out there and you need to execute on your goals and plans and strategies. to get there. So
Absolutely.
it's a complete change in the way you wake up in the morning and feel about the day when you have an abundance mindset. So when a business owner is scaling their business, either up or down, what do you see as some of the biggest mistakes that they make while they're trying to scale their businesses?
I think the simple fact we talked a little bit about managing change, and I think being willing to actually initiate that change is critical. Anytime somebody wants to scale a business, so think about it this way: if they're wanting to scale it up or down, they have to have an end in mind, right?
Right.
So they're thinking about, here's where I want to end up, and we're back to that same place of planning and understanding the clarity of the process that it's going to take. So if somebody says to me, I want to double our business in 5 years, that's a great vision. Let's get it clear. And then let's figure out where you're at today. I think businesses tend to assume that where they're at today is okay for that vision. It's not always the case. In order for somebody to embark upon the Appalachian Trail, they have to be ready, right? They have to know where they're going to start, what they're going to do. They have to know what that position looks like. Businesses are the same way. So the first thing they have to do is they have to start out understanding where they are, knowing where they want to go, and then it becomes a matter of planning and performance, execution. So we help them go through that process of figuring that out and then setting those plans in place so that they know along that path exactly where they're at all the time.
Gotcha. It sounds like the house's path goal theory that I learned in management school, and where management sets the goals, but they're also in charge of defining the path for their associates and employees to get there and to achieve those goals.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
How do you help business owners develop those effective strategies for marketing and growing their businesses?
So this is an interesting question because I work with business owners to get those strategies set, but I don't set them. And I'll tell business owners, I'll tell prospects when I first start talking to them, I will not tell them how to run their business. It's not my business, it's theirs. And it's important for them to understand the distinction between that, because as we develop strategies, they have to be their strategies. And I think the key to it is helping them understand how the strategies affect their goal achievement. So as we're thinking about things like marketing and growing the business, we'll start by identifying a multitude of options. So if you want to grow and scale your business, I would first ask, right, what options do we have for doing that? How do we do it? Do we do it with more realtors? Do we do it with more geography? Do we do it with more locations? What really works and what works for you? And so as you define that, then we can say what needs to happen in order for that to be achieved. So when we work together like that, it's about bringing the thought leadership to the business owner to help them make sure that those marketing and growth strategies are developed in a way that fit their business. And if they do that, then they're easily executable.
Gotcha. Richard, can you share a success story of a client that you've worked with in the past and how your coaching made a significant impact on their business?
Sure. There's a lot of different, coaching entails so many different things that it's kind of hard to just say this is one. But I do have one client that I worked with for an extended period of time, and they went through a number of things that maybe represent the breadth of what I do. He was one of my first clients, and he came to me in his mid-50s, recognizing that he needed to better prepare his end of career transition time, his planning for his family and his goals and that sort of he was the minority interest owner in 5 different businesses. Very active in those, but the majority partner wasn't a good fit. So my client was asking, how do I buy the majority partner out? How do I take on that majority role and get control of the companies? So that was the first conversation that we started with. That was the first coaching engagement, was to determine what's the right strategy for him to grow his share of the company.
That's complicated.
It was very complicated. And in some respects, the majority owner was a little reluctant. And in other respects, they
holds all the cards.
They held all the cards, but they also had some motivations to exit. So in discussing all of that, we kind of developed a strategy for him to approach the business owner. And he was successful at the end of the day in acquiring the controlling interest in actually buying the owner out totally in 3 of the 5 businesses. And that involved everything from the legal aspects and the financial due diligence and all the things necessary to get that done. I didn't do it. The business owner had his own legal counsel, his own finance people, his accounting and CPA folks and tax people that were all reviewing this at the same time. What I'm helping them do is think through what are those steps and what do you need to be asking those people, and how do you need to have engagement, where's the risk, and how do you cover that? So long story short, we got this bought. Well, once we got them bought, then it became operational. Okay, now I've got it.
Great.
Now what do I do with them? Well, if you're trying to achieve this goal that we talked about initially, and in your career, in your profession, in your family, then we need to take these 3 and we need to get them to fulfill that goal. So then it became much more of an operational coaching environment that we worked through, where it had everything to do with sales and vendor management, operational efficiency, HR issues. We had some people that didn't do well, others we had to coach up to do better. Others we brought into the organization with new experience and expertise, and he managed all 3, and he was kind of a managing director of the 3 companies. So over a number of years, we continued this operational growth, and each one of those companies then were at various points of success and challenge throughout those years. But we helped continue to keep them moving forward. We knew that in the overall picture that within 5 to 7 years from the time we started, he wanted to exit. So we knew that day would come. So then it became, once we had them operationally sufficient, it became, okay, how do we put in succession plans so that the other owners, minority owners in some of these businesses were also employees? How do they either expand their ownership and buy in? How do they exit the company when the time comes that they want? How do they enact their goals inside a succession plan? So all of those ended up getting negotiated for all 3 companies, and those plans were set and in place with multiple options. If I'm here, this will happen. If I'm not here, God forbid, these things should happen. And that was all put into place. Once we had that in place, then it did become, we were at that stage where then the conversation had to turn to what's the transition look like? And as we were talking through the transition, it started to engage more conversations with minority owners. And everybody had different motivations. So it was balancing out what are those motivations, how do they fit into the big picture, and how do they manage them. And at the end of the day, to the companies, he and the minority owners then agreed to actually sell to a private equity company that specialized in their industry. And they retained the operations and managing director scenarios, but they sacrificed the ownership and traded it out for cash, basically. The third one was different. The minority owners in the third one, they wanted to retain independent ownership. They didn't want to become part of an investment firm ownership scenario. But one of the minority partners wanted to execute that now, and the other wanted to wait. So this became a real problem for everybody because they wanted to do it, They didn't want to do it now. Nobody had their time in notice. This one was a little bit more challenging, where we had to engage with both parties in a way that got them where they wanted to be. At the end of the day, they did initiate the buyout and become an independent company. So my client now sat on the wealth accumulated from the sale of all three of them, continued as a managing director for a period of years to help the ownership continue and ensure that business would be successful. And in probably the next 18, 24 months, he'll exit it totally. And you'll probably find him on a golf course somewhere.
That's great. You really took them full circle through all of those businesses.
It was a long and fun engagement. We really enjoyed it.
Very interesting. So, as a business owner, I know how difficult it is to stay on top of what our area of expertise is. Every single day, something changes, some dynamic, either of the market or specifically to technology in our industry changes, and we get mired in the weeds sometimes, and we're working in our business and not on our business. For you as a business coach, how do you stay on top of, because you have to stay on top of everything, not just where we're hyper-focused on our specific businesses. You have to have a broader expertise than just the business owner that's focused on punching our own widgets out. How do you stay on top of those trends? Where do you get your data from? How do you make sure that you're providing the value to those owners that are mired down in the weeds of their businesses?
So it's a great question, and I get it in a variety of ways virtually every time I talk to a business owner. And usually it manifests itself in what do you know about the real estate business? What do you know about widget making? What do you know about the restaurant business? Whatever I happen to be focused on. And being a bit of a smart aleck in my natural state, I usually respond in a way that says, I don't know a damn thing about your business. And I say it to set the stage for a conversation around that, because what I usually say is that what you need? Do you need somebody to come in and actually tell you where the real estate industry is? Do you need somebody to come in and tell you where the widget making industry is? Because if that's true, then we need to go find some help to have somebody come in that actually is immersed in that industry. Because I'm not, I can't provide that to you. Now, what I can do is I can utilize your information. You're the expert in the industry. I'm the expert in the business performance. But I can utilize what you know about the industry, and we can leverage the information that's public to find all kinds of information. So, for instance, one of the things that we do, usually one of the first couple of steps that we'll take with a new client, is we'll take 3 years of their financial statements, and I'll take those information, take that information, and I'll do an analysis on those, and I can pull industry information on their particular industry and line it up against what's happening in that in the U.S., and we can see exactly how they perform compared to their peers. And it's a broad picture, and it's not an actionable perspective, but it is a perspective that allows you to get an understanding of where you stand within your industry. And then the public information gives us a lot on what's happening in the industry. So if I happen to go out on the internet and I'm researching the residential real estate market, and I see certain things that are happening out there, I may come to a meeting that we have with a client and I say, hey, Greg, did you happen to catch this? You know, I was working with somebody and they do some multifamily housing investments. And I came across an article as I was researching that industry, because when I'm working with a client and their industry, I will be out looking at stuff, you know, on the industry, but I don't try to be the expert in that. I just want to be knowledgeable about it. So I found this article. Did you realize that Cincinnati is one of the top 5 cities in the nation for the investment in multifamily properties? Interesting piece of information.
It's very difficult right now to actually find a multifamily rental. It's almost impossible. We're doing a lot of dialing numbers and scouring databases that we never had to do before. So.
Sure. It was an interesting perspective that I had, because I'm not in the industry, I didn't have until I found that information. And then, you know, in sharing it with my client, he's like, oh yeah, I already know that. And they should already know that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an interesting perspective that we have, that people oftentimes when they engage me for my services want me to be, or think I'm going to be the expert that tells them what to do. I'm not, and I'm not. I'm very clear about that.
And sometimes it's good. We see a lot of progress in our own business, especially with agents who didn't happen to be in the industry before, that made a change in careers and decided to be a real estate agent. They don't have some of those preconceived notions, or we're stuck in a process that we've been in for years, and we get this fresh outlook and somebody that comes in and gives us these great new ideas. I love having that. So I understand the apprehension from a business owner saying, well, what do they know about my specific industry? But like you said, you're bringing a totally different focus. So if they need help with their own industry expertise, that's a totally different story. You're helping them work on their business from a different viewpoint or a different standpoint. So it's interesting. So this is kind of funny because I know it's going to sound odd. Why would somebody call you for help if they're resistant to change? But that actually happens in a bunch of different ways. And just to set the question up, I'm a client of Richard's, and I needed help with my own business. But where the resistance to change came in was with my management team and other business partners. So how do you address that when you have a client that has either their management team, another partner, or even themselves, that when you get in there, they're resistant to the changes that you are suggesting?
Yeah, that's it's interesting because a couple things start to happen. Overcoming the resistance to change with the business owner is much easier than addressing the resistance to change with management. Overcoming the resistance to change with the owner is about being sure that they're comfortable and clear with the vision and the value of it, and the formula we talked about before. You know, what's the level of real dissatisfaction? Are you just a little bit unhappy about the way things are? Are you extremely frustrated with where they are, or are you just fed up? You know, and so figure what is that level of dissatisfaction, and what does that vision look like, and where do you want to go, and what steps do you need to take? If I can take the business owner through that process, we can get them to overcome the resistance to change. Getting them to get the management team over that resistance to change is a whole other matter, because now I have to teach them to do what I just did with them. And so that they communicate with their management team about that dissatisfaction, about that vision, about those first steps and why they're so important. But as they begin to do it, it opens a dialogue with that management team, and eventually it sinks in. This has to happen, and here's why. And not too often, but sometimes that vision includes a what if we don't?
Mm-hmm.
And that sometimes is enough to get management and others to wake up and listen to what's being said about the need for change. Because sometimes the what if we don't do this is scary.
Right.
And unfortunately, fear is a motivator, and sometimes that helps get them there. So really it's trying to help the business owner do what I do in a way of asking questions and communicating with their management team. If I need to, I'll meet with the management team. I just this last week had a client who has a situation very similar to this. He gets it. He knows it. He's very close with his management team. They're personal friends and obviously career colleagues. And he's got a tough message he needs to deliver. And it's not about anybody losing a job. It's not about anything that's financially detrimental to him. It's about the way the business is run. And I can just see the anguish when we're talking about it. He's dreading this conversation with these individuals. And so this week, he's having that conversation. And next Wednesday, I may be able to share with you how well that worked.
Yeah.
But I haven't said this to him, but I know in the back of my mind that sometimes there's a value to somebody outside of the organization sharing the perspective. In this situation, it might be, excuse me, in this situation, it might be such that depending on how his conversations this week go, I may offer up, let me talk with him. Let's identify the talking points that you would like communicated, and let me sit down and share them with them my perspective. Because sometimes that 50 miles away outside the organization expert is going to get a little more credence than the person you've been working next to for the last 10 years.
Right.
And so it really is situational, and it depends. If the owner is reluctant to change, and we've talked about the need for it, and they just don't want to do it, it usually isn't a system if they don't want to do what I'm suggesting, because typically, while I'll throw ideas out there, it's their choice. So they have to choose.
Right.
But if they choose, I'm not going to do anything. And I have had that happen. Then I'll fire a client. And I'll tell them, if you're not willing, if you want to get here, and you're not willing to enact any change to get there, I can't help you.
Right.
I can't do it for you. Coachy does the work.
Yeah.
I just help guide it. So those situations happen. They're few and far between. But when they do, it's just time to part ways.
Gotcha. So our final question is to the young business coaches that are out there, or aspiring business coaches. What advice do you have for somebody who's really wanting to make a difference in the lives of entrepreneurs and other business owners?
Shut up and listen. I think there's too many coaches and consultants out there that want to bring the answer to the table and be the expert in the room. And they're busy talking about their experience, and they're busy talking about why a business has to do this and has to do that. It's not their business. And the one thing I love about the career I've got, the way I approach things is, I don't take that burden on. I've always been a firm believer that two minds are better than one, and I'm not the smartest guy in the room. It's about problem solution. If you shut up and listen, if you ask questions, a business owner will tell you what opportunities and challenges they're facing and what they want to get done, and then help guide their thoughts. Be a thought leader. Help guide their thoughts so that they make the right decisions for them. Because what I did in my career doesn't necessarily make a damn bit of difference to what they do in theirs. And the objective here is to help them be successful. If they're successful, everybody wins. So to anybody that's trying to go into this business, be humble, listen, ask questions, guide thoughts. It's really critical that the business owner take ownership of the direction they're going to take. That doesn't happen when you go and give somebody an answer. I can tell you how to run this real estate office, but I run it into the ground, but I can tell you how to run it.
Yep.
Right? That makes sense. You need to figure that out.
Right. Well, I am, and some of the viewers might wonder why we're not talking specifically about real estate today. And as my testimonial to Richard, I am a client. It's kind of like the hair club for men.
Yeah.
I'm not just trying to promote the product. I am a client. Richard helped my business out a few years back. We were not happy with where we were at as a company, with growth, with the direction that we were headed, and some of our management team just wasn't clicking. And what that did, and Richard's expertise in being able to step outside of what we were doing and punching our widgets every day and looking at the broader picture of how our team was structured, what goals we had set, how we were getting there, whose responsibilities each one of these strategies, whose desk they landed on, and how effective those folks were at actually executing and achieving those goals. Really, what it did for us is it identified who should be doing those tasks, who shouldn't be doing, and it for the lack of a better word, a little bit of discomfort was a good thing, because it moved us in a totally different direction, not only with the management structure, but ownership as well, and has really defined where we have gone as a business since then. So my testimonial is, if you're just not satisfied with where you're at in your business, whether you're a real estate agent, whether you're punching widgets or making donuts somewhere, reach out to Richard. He is amazing with his business expertise and experience on really analyzing where you're at, where you want to be, and making sure that you have a path to get to some of the goals that you have. I love the story that you had with your business owner that you brought full circle. And if we do have somebody out there that's feeling like they're not comfortable with where they're at right now and they need to make a change and need to talk to a business coach, how would they get in touch with you?
So, simple enough. So a couple different ways you can access with me. First thing I'd suggest you do is take a look at the website, strategicorientation.com. That'll give you a little more definition around some of the services and what we do. We can do some testimonial information, that type of thing. But my email is as simple as richard@strategicorientation.com. That gets directly to me.
And we'll have a link on the screen for everybody to connect through.
And I only operate with a mobile number anymore, so with that number on the screen, it's 812-350-7621. That doesn't mean I'm not in Cincinnati. It just means that I was not in Cincinnati when I got my first cell phone.
That's right. Everybody keeps the same number. It's just like realtors keep our own profile picture from the first time we were licensed. Doesn't matter how long ago.
Yeah, it's interesting how that dynamic of phone numbers has changed over time.
Yes, nobody pays attention to the area code anymore.
Right, absolutely.
So, Richard, thank you so much for everything that you've done for us, and thank you for being with us today. This is Greg Traynor with Wyndham-Lyons Realty Services. We're happy that you joined us today for another episode of Keeping It Real Estate and our business community partners together, making a difference for you. Please feel free to give us a call or one of our amazing agents at 513-322-2905, or you can visit our website at Wyndham-Lyons.com. Wyndham-Lyons.com for all of your real estate needs in southwestern Ohio and northern Kentucky.